Hello, these are the build instructions for the Menorah kit from 4-Bit Industries. We will be covering where to install each component and which way around to make sure we have a nice light up menorah. First, let's take a look at the pieces. We have a PCB. We have a chip, a socket, and two switches. We're going to have a bunch of LEDs. There should be at least 9 of them in your pack. A voltage regulator. A capacitor. For some reason there are 2 in this one. There should only be 1. A 9-volt battery clip and 4 resistors. So let's get started by soldering in the resistors. All 4 resistors are identical, and they are not polarized, meaning you can insert them either way around and it will be no problem. So to prepare the resistors, simply bend the leads down into a U shape like that, and then we're going to insert them into the 4 locations marked R1, R2, R3, and R4. And if your resistors seem a little small for the spaces they're going into, that's okay. We'll just bend these leads out once we've got it inserted, and that will hold it in place for soldering. And you'll get the hang of how to bend the leads once you've done it several times. I'm going to go ahead and insert all 4 to save time, and then I will solder all 4 of them. If you would like to have more space, not so many wires in the way, you can certainly insert these one at a time and solder each one after you insert it. So now I've got all 4 resistors inserted. Again, the leads kind of splayed out so that they don't move around on me while soldering. And now I'm going to take a piece of tape to hold this down. If you have a PCB vise or a helping hands tool, you can use those. But just a little bit of tape will do just fine. If you've never soldered before, make sure to get the iron in contact with the pad and the lead at the same time, and then feed some solder into the joint. We have to get the lead and the pad hot so that the solder will flow onto both. And once they're all soldered, you can take some wire cutters and clip the leads. Don't clip so close that you're cutting through the solder joint. We're just cutting off the excess lead. And if you're worried about disturbing the joint, you can cut the leads before you solder them. But for beginners, it's better to do it this way around. Now let's zoom in a little bit and look at those solder joints. Those look pretty good. I can see the solder adhering to the lead. It should pull up the lead a little bit, and it's covering the solder pads. That's what you want to see. So now, let's move on to another component. The socket should be inserted the right way around. When you look at the footprint for the IC socket, you'll notice there's a notch on one side. And when you look at the socket, you'll see there's a notch on one side there too. And we want to insert the socket so that the 2 notches match. And then to hold that in place for soldering, you can try bending the leads on the other side, or you can just use a piece of tape to hold that down. Make sure you can feel the leads sticking up out of these holes so that it hasn't shifted around too much on you after you turn it around. What I like to do is solder one lead and then check to make sure that the socket is pushed against the board, that it's still in place. If it's not, you can heat that one joint up and push it back into place carefully because it's very hot. But if it is in position and you like how it looks, you can go ahead and solder the other 8 pins, or the other 7 pins. Alrighty, there we go. Now, let's move on to the slide switch. So this is the slide switch, and we want the actuator sticking out to our right so that it's easy to touch. We'll shove that into position, and it tends to stay in position fairly well, but you can put a piece of tape on it to be sure. So now we want to solder the 3 leads in the middle that make the electrical connection, and we want to solder the 2 legs for stability. So I'm going to start with the three legs in the middle, and then when soldering the legs, make sure you've really got the iron on both the big leg and the pad, and you'll have to flow a lot of solder in there, but once you do, you'll have a nice secure connection. So there we go. Next, let's move on to the tactile switch. The tactile switch has bent leads that are going to help it stay in position. So just shove that in there, and there is no right or wrong way around. Go ahead and solder all 4 leads. Switches like this have redundant electrical connections because there are 4 leads for mechanical strength. Alrighty, continuing on over here, let's do the ceramic capacitor. Goes into position C1. Again, it's non-polarized. You can just bend the leads out the way you did on the resistors and solder that into place. And clip the leads. Next, we'll do the voltage regulator. I like to clip this away from the tape. And then we have to insert it so that the flat part right here matches the flat part on the footprint. So there we go. You can see the rounded part matches. And this will not go all the way in. That's okay. You can just bend these leads to hold it in place for soldering. And again, you can tape the board down to keep it from moving around your desk. Make sure to solder on a heat-resistant surface so that you don't mar up any tabletops. And we'll trim those leads. Alrighty, what is left? Not much. Let's look at the LEDs. Now it's very important that the LEDs be inserted the right way round. How do you know which way that is? Well, LEDs, like all diodes, only allow current to flow in one direction. And the clue they give you as to which lead is which is the length of the leads. So there's a long lead and a short lead. And you want the long lead to go through the pad that is circular shaped, and you want the short lead to go through the pad that is square shaped. You should be able to just make that out, that one of those pads is round and the other square. Now, inserting these is a little bit tricky as well. We want them to look like candle flames, so I'm going to get that long lead through the round pad, and I'm not going to stick it all the way in. I'm going to stick it in till maybe there's ½ centimeter left, and then I'm going to bend it up to be the candle flame on my candle. And I can insert all 9 of them, or I can do them one at a time. Let's just do one right now. I'm going to recommend taping this into place, taping it flat, because simply bending the leads isn't going to hold it very well. So let's solder that one into place. And then I'll go ahead and do the other 9, or the other 8 rather. Alright, so now we have just one more component to solder on, and that is the battery clip. Now you'll notice the battery clip has a kind of round clip, and then there's one with kind of a square shape to it because of the sides that are folded over. And you will notice on the back, because we are going to solder this to the back, that there is a round pad and a square pad, and so we want to insert that so that the round pad matches the round clip and the square pad the square clip. And once again, we're going to tape that into place for soldering, and then we're going to solder it at the front. So the battery's going to be sticking out the back. Means we have to solder at the front, which is the opposite of what we did for everything else. So again, make sure your iron has good contact with the pad and with the lead. I'll feed a little bit of solder into the joint there to make a connection, but then it's going to take a few seconds before this is really hot enough for the solder to flow all over it. And you can really cover it over a good bit like that. Make sure solder flows all the way around that pad. There we go, that's really flowing around. Alrighty, so now we are all soldered up. Let me take all my tape off. There's one more thing we have to do though. We have to insert the chip. Okay, now the chip legs will be splayed out a little bit, and we'd like to get them vertical. So what I like to do is roll the chip gently against the table to straighten all the legs at once. And I do that on both sides. And when it looks like they're pointed straight down, I look for the little dot. Every chip either has a little dot or it has a little notch that indicates which end pin 1 is at. And you may be able to just make out that dot. There it is, glinting in the light. The dot needs to go near the notch. And if your chip has a notch, well, the notch just lines up with the notch. But you get all those legs aligned straight, make sure they're in on both sides, and then you press down, and it will go into the socket. Simple as that. All right, now we're ready to test this. I'm going to move my switch into the off position, and I'm going to look for a battery. All right, I've located a battery, and we're going to plug it onto the back. The battery acts as a kind of stand. But now I'm going to turn this on, and I have 1 and 2 candles on. A little hard to tell in this light, but if I turn it off and I turn it on again, I should have 3 candles light. And each time I turn it on, I get 1 more candle lighting. So there's 4. What if you need to go back? Well, you can either switch it on and off until it gets all the way to the end. Once all 8 are lit, you turn it off, turn it on again, it'll go back to 1 candle. But I've also added a back button to the circuit, so you can just back down the number of days. You can back all the way to 0 if you want. And then the next time you turn on, you'll have just 1 candle. That's it. I hope you enjoyed this. Be sure to check out FourBitIndustries.com for more soldering kits. Thank you. Bye-bye.